Hi everybody, this is Dear Mama Sal on a very rainy Wednesday morning. This is called Socked in anybody's language. It is 6 degrees here in southern British Columbia, which would equate to 42 American. And it is raining. There's nothing drizzly about this. This is rain. And as you can hear, I still have a chest cold. It's now just, I think it's actually getting a little easier, but you wouldn't know that at night, because at night I'm still coughing a great deal, and what I find is that, you know, even my ribs are sore now from coughing. And for those of you who immediately got a red flag on that and went, be careful, because this could be, you know, something worse if your ribs are sore. I have been that route, so I know that I'm very aware to be careful. At the moment, this is, you know, definitely a feeling of just using the muscles too much rather than anything more serious. I'm listening for wheezing and watching everything else that, you know, indicates whether this has gone into infection in my lungs or just you know, just the cold is in my lungs. That if it gets really infected, I know what that looks and feels and tastes like. So and I say that because, you know, it's an important thing to know your body, and I think it's to me anyway, it's a reassuring thing when you know, okay, fine, it doesn't sound too good, people don't like the sound of it, but I have to remember that I spent many years smoking, and therefore I've always had a very dramatic cough, if you like. Doesn't necessarily mean that I am suffering as much as it sounds. I mean, I'm obviously suffering because I'm coughing my lungs out, but, you know, literally that's what's happening. And it's a good thing in a way, because it's probably removing some of the tar with it. So I look at it and I go, hey, again, how lucky am I? It's just a chest cold. So I wanted to give a really big heads up this morning to Paul. I know that Paul finished his radiation treatments yesterday, and I wanted to really give him a big round of applause is what I'm trying to say, because that was incredible what he did. He not only went through all that, but he took himself there every day. I mean, he didn't have somebody drive him and sit with him and do all those things. He literally went and, you know, walked to the train station, went by train, had his radiation, and then came back. But this was even more stunning and amazing, because Paul suffers from claustrophobia to a certain degree, and, you know, the mask they needed to put him in to make sure that they got the right spot every time, you know, he managed to do that. And to be, literally confined every time. So I want to just really say that I am very, very aware that you have set a standard, Paul, that not many people are going to reach. And again, another incredible piece of inspiration for the rest of us, which is, if you think you can't, think about Paul. I must admit, Paul, that I just couldn't imagine you going through with that. And that's not that I didn't believe in you, it was just that part of my heart that was so terrified for you. And so I just really am very, very, very delighted to hear that you managed all of this. And you look at it and you go, sometimes we just don't know what we're capable of. And Paul, if you can do this, then how many other things in your life can you now do? Things that you probably thought you couldn't, but now that you've seen you can go through what you've just been through, wow. Hopefully that will inspire you. And I keep thinking back to Leslie, who was agoraphobic when we first met. I hadn't been out of the house for 3 years and is now busy taking her driving test. It's just like, wow, people. These are people who want to make life different. They want it that badly that they're prepared to overcome their phobias, their self-talk, their everything. And believe you me, it takes a lot to overcome what is being said inside your head. And I think about Carrie at the moment, who just decided it was enough. She'd had enough, and she went and did some therapy, and I think is continuing to. Yay, way to go, Carrie. Because she also realized that, just taking the pills alone wasn't going to fix this. You need to do some very hard work to get, to get through this sort of stuff, or you can just take the pills. I personally have to say that if you do the pills and some work, if you get therapy or get help, whatever it is, your time spent in the negative is severely shortened, or dramatically shortened, I should say. And if you're really lucky, if you do enough, you will get a chance to not visit it again. I think that's my greatest gift. And I am very, very grateful for that I have been free of depression for many, many years now. And yay, I do not miss it at all. And the thing I think that makes me so aware now is I know I know when I start resenting things, or when I start blaming other people, I know that that's the biggest warning sign. Hello. Yes. Do not go down this route. If you don't like what's going on, do something about it. If you want to blame other people, sure, you can do that. But either do something about it or shut up. And as a lot of you know from listening to the vlogs, my number one rule is, compare yourself to somebody that's got a lot worse trouble than you have. And so, but the thing is this, how many of us, I think my mum used to have an expression about one family member, who I absolutely adored, but never mind. And she always said that her strength came through misery. And what she meant by that was that she seemed to be happiest when she was complaining. She seemed to be happiest when she was getting, attention because she was sick. So, you need to look at that and go, is that true of you? Now, the other thing that I find really interesting, and I'm certain that I got a lot of feedback coming on this one, I hope I do anyway. How many of you can miraculously feel a whole lot better if somebody you really care about is, coming over? The reason I say that, I can always remember with my mom. She'd be really sick, if you listen to her, really sick. But if she knew that my brother was coming, she would miraculously be capable of all sorts of incredible things. And the moment he left, she would be sick again. Now, I often wondered, and I've got to sort of look at the reality of this. I'm sure I must do it myself to some degree. Probably did it this weekend with Dougie coming. But I wonder why the endorphins suddenly kick in on those situations. And I just wondered, for those of you who are in chronic pain and illness, I just wondered whether, you find that when you get excited about somebody coming over, does the pain diminish? I'm not saying that it goes away, but does it diminish in some way? Because if so, then we all need to look at that and maybe, entertain more often, however tiring it might be. And again, you hear me say time and time again that, you can't think your way out of these things. You've got to do your way out. And I think this is part of it. Coming home and crawling into bed and sleeping your way out of it is not going to get you out of it. It may dull the pain for a few hours, but it actually doesn't solve the problem. And so I find that I really, I almost don't have time for this anymore, you know what I mean? My life seems to be so busy now that I really don't have time for that, because it's on to the next thing. And I'm hoping that some of you can see the wisdom of that. If you fill your life full of stuff that you enjoy doing, whatever it is, you don't really have time to sit around and feel sorry for yourself. So, one of the things that I did say that I was going to talk about a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, seemed like forever, but never mind, was the routines. And it was very interesting because when I talked about routines, one of the great comments came from Alice in Denmark. And what Alice said, which really sort of made me take a double look at it, and she said she doesn't like routines too much because it means you're doing it without really thinking. You're not in the present. And I thought, boy, that's a really Zen moment there. So I then thought, and I laughed, and I don't know how many of you relate to this one, I thought, if I didn't have my routines at this age, I'm not sure I'd take my pills. I'm not sure that I would even have coffee in the morning. I'm pretty certain there are sort of things that should be absolutely no-brainers, literally. If I didn't have an order to do them, I think half of them would be forgotten. And this only is funny if you happen to be a little older. For those of you who are young, it's coming. And so you almost have to link things with days. You know, if this is Tuesday, I need to do X. And for me, because my life now is so very busy, if I didn't have that sort of routine, you know, would I do the garbage? Would I remember to do the garbage? You know, because it's not necessarily something that, well, I guess eventually the thing overflows, so you do go and empty it, but you know what I mean? It's like, I try and have things linked to days so that I remember, get this out of the way now. Oh, the poor thing. Oh my gosh, I'm just watching somebody on a really pretty electric scooter, and they're in rain gear and they look wonderful. You know, they got this beautiful rain gear on that matches the scooter. Looks really great. And I was just thinking, you know, that actually looks like quite good fun because they look like they're dry. And just as I was watching them, they went through a puddle. That didn't look so much fun to me because that water went up as high as their knees. And it was about then I hoped that their rain gear was a little longer when they bent their legs, you know, just to sit on the scooter, because otherwise they would now have boots full of water if they had half boots on or something. It really was quite the deluge. And you know, you couldn't see that that was a deep puddle because it was just a puddle. I'm really glad I have my Jeep. Thank you, Jeepy. So, I really would love to hear some of your stories about your routines. Do you have any funny ones? And I say that because, you know, you probably all heard the story about the wife who cooking a leg of lamb and made sure that the butcher, you know, cut through the main bone, and made quite a deal about it with the butcher. And when the child asked about it, she said, no, you have to do that with lamb. And the child said, why? And she said, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I know my mother always did it, and I know that her mother always did it, and it's, you know, part of what you need to do when you're cooking lamb. And so anyway, the next time she went to visit her mother, she said, by the way, Mum, you know, why did Granny always cut the meat bone? And why did you? And, you know, there must be a good reason. And my daughter asked me, you know, why? And I didn't really have a good answer. And the grandmother smiled and said the reason that I always cut the bone was because my grandma, your great-grandmother, always did. And by the way, the reason she did was because she didn't have a pan big enough. What? She didn't have a pan big enough, so she always had to cut the end of the leg of lamb bone and bend it. And then you've got to look at your life and go, how many traditions are we carrying on that were initiated by our great-great-grandparents for some reason? As simple as the fact that their roasting pan wasn't quite big enough for a leg of lamb. You know, well, how many of those traditions do we carry on? Now, I don't know what it was like in your family, but in mine, my mother was superstitious. And there was this, I often wonder how serious it was, but I think it was fairly serious for her. You never looked at a new moon through a glass window. I mean, through a window, obviously it's glass. You had to go outside and curtsy to the new moon. No, it was more than that. Had to curtsy to the new moon, turn around 3 times, and then turn the money over in your pocket. It was quite a ritual. Now, she used to make the children do that as well. So we know it was fairly serious to her. None of us, as far as I know, none of us kept up that tradition. We all got that one and decided that was really weird. We didn't want that one in our lives. But I can't help wondering how many traditions there are in our world that, you know, come from very ancient type realities that have absolutely no bearing today. I'd be really interested if your family had any that you know, were interesting, like mine. Actually, when I think about it, there were quite a few of my family. Probably accounts for a lot of things, right? So I'm going to wish you a very pleasant day of ritual and of hopefully a very pleasant day of smiling a little about your routines. And then have a look at other people's. How many of you got, you know, friends and co-workers or whatever, you know, who have whole rituals about how they tidy up their desk or how they put out work on their desk. Everybody's got their own little ritual. I certainly would not survive my job if I did not do that in a systematic, Yvonne calls it kachunka method. In other words, I give this much time for doing this task, this much time for doing that task, and I have to do that all during the day, and I do it day after day after day. Why? Because if I don't do that, it gets totally out of hand. I have so many different areas of work, if you like, that if I don't dedicate a little bit of time to each one of those bits every day, I will get overwhelmed. And so I've got a routine that helps me keep ahead of the game. Well, I'll never be ahead of the game, but keeps the urgent stuff moving nicely. And on a slow day, I can catch up a bit. So very interesting. So routines and rituals, there you go. Do they actually save you, or are they, as Alice suggests in some cases, just mindless? You know, you don't know why you do it the way you do it. And you are missing out in the moment because of it. This is dear Mama Sal saying, have a wonderful day. Remember to look after one another. And remember to reward good behavior. Great believer in that. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good day.